My name is Alexis. I'm a therapy consultant working up in Betsy Cadwallader. And I'm going to talk to you today about a project we're running called the Enhanced AHP Rehabilitation Service. This is a service I'm leading, and it originates around some of the strategy that's out in Wales at the moment with regards to the need to deliver a coordinated community offer. So with a focus on prevention and a focus on rehabilitation. We've developed this service thinking about that strategic context, but also thinking about the need around complexity. So this comes from the realization that a lot of people we're working with have quite complex needs. So they have needs that sit across mental health conditions, multiple physical conditions, and potentially social conditions as well. And it was an observation from some of the work I'd done previously that we weren't necessarily always able to respond to those complex needs. We then looked at research and found that actually there's quite a lot of evidence around this, that people with complex needs utilise an awful lot of healthcare resource, and actually we don't respond to them brilliantly. You know, our response is often focused in a condition-specific way, and people with complex needs often a holistic, multifaceted response is needed. So that was the kind of context that we started with. We were also aware that our health board had done some work on data where it could identify people who are using healthcare services a great deal. So we developed a business case and a team around this. So it's myself, a couple of advanced practitioners, and then we have some admin and rehab assistants. Where we started, so at the beginning of 2024 really, we started by looking at the data sets that we already had. So we looked at, does the data set, does the criteria that the health board have identify people with complex needs? From our review, we found there were some issues with the data set. So it would often identify a single admission over multiple wards as multiple admissions. But we were able to refine it, and we moved to multiple short admissions as actually quite a good indicator that people were possibly dipping into or starting to struggle, potentially. We then thought what we need to do next is look at a review. So we need to review the people who sit in this data set, see, are they people we think we can work with? Are they people who have complex needs and challenges? And also, does it start to point the way towards some of the system issues we have? Because I think it was very important that right from the beginning, we always understood that our service is very small and we weren't going to have a massive clinical impact. But what we could use is our clinical work to understand our systems better and to think about system change. We did the review of 32 people. We looked across multiple note systems to understand what was going on for those people, their journeys through healthcare. What we came out with is that there is a cohort of people. It was identifying people who had multifaceted needs, and there were some system issues within that. So the system issues we identified were communication issues, so where information was not necessarily following people across different parts of the system. There was issues of data accuracy, so sometimes things were not documented or misdocumented across different systems. There were issues around reactivity, so we were always responding to crisis, not necessarily thinking about the multifaceted stuff, just the crisis need. We could see a reactiveness where we weren't really embedding rehabilitation and future thinking with people, and we could also see process delays within our system as well. From that, we thought, well, this is a reasonable cohort for us to start working with. We think we can do some things differently, and we think that working with these people is going to inform us more about what's going on within our system. So we've then started a PDSA process. So we started by working with one cohort. We then moved on. We've introduced our assistants into the roles in our second PDSA cycle. We've expanded the area we're working with, and we're now working with a live cohort. And we've been pulling data out of our work that we're doing. So as we're working with people, we're completing outcome measures, gaining patient feedback, and looking at what are the system impacts we're having. And I think probably the best way I can illustrate some of that is through a bit of a case study, which I'm going to keep very, very general. So we identified one gentleman who had a cognitive impairment, but also had a physical health problem that was leading to admission to hospital it was about 4 times a year, plus a couple of SDEC admissions. When we reviewed him, the thing he really wanted to work on was actually he didn't want to be admitted. He knew it was impacting his function. He wanted to be able to be at home more, to function more, and to avoid these admissions. When we did that multi-system review, so we looked at what was going on for his admissions, but also what was going on in his GP notes, we identified he didn't actually need to go into hospital at all. There was a letter in the notes saying actually this could have been treated as a day case. So we were able to head off the next admission. We actually cancelled an admission, booked him in as a day case. And as a result of that, he got home quicker and felt more able to start engaging in rehabilitation. So he started doing some mobility exercises. We got him to the point with some changes of mobility equipment where he could walk outside. He started looking after his own health a lot more, which was brilliant. So we think there are some really good system outcomes here. And this is one single case study, but we have a couple like this, or we're building up a library of these, I should perhaps say, where we think we can see system impacts. So we're avoiding costs, we're avoiding admissions, we are supporting people to gain the care they need or to remain in the community more effectively. So we're still in that PDSA process. We're still seeking to refine what we're doing. We're seeking to refine how we identify people, but we're now really at a point where we're starting to think about system change, and we're thinking about that on two levels. So the first level is thinking about what we do in AHP services. So we think that we could start thinking about how we access AHP services, how we become more rehabilitative, more focused on that stuff. And we're starting by working with AHP colleagues on how we measure value. I think we're not measuring value very consistently. So if we can start to understand how we're measuring it, and we can do that consistently across services and projects, that'll help us start to make decisions about where we focus best as AHPs and fit into that system. Secondly, we are starting to work with colleagues on actually what is our vision, or this is what I'm hoping to do, is how are our primary and community care services going to start working together? What does that look like? How do we hold some of that complexity? How do we coordinate that care and really embed those principles of rehabilitation and prevention? So I think that's a journey we're on. I can't say we're at the end of it, but I think it's also interesting to be able to take that clinical information, what's happening for people now, and think about how that informs our system change.